My name is Les Stanaland, and I'll be presenting today my research on the effects of oil on the informal economy. So you can see in the picture at the top left-hand corner, this is an example of the informal economy. It's people working, they're doing the best they can to provide for themselves and their families. However, this is a very hard scrabble existence. You can see that the hours are very long, the conditions are very unsafe and unsanitary, the transactions are conducted in cash. And this is a good example of what a lot of informal economic activity, especially in developing countries, looks like. And so for policymakers, you can see that the deleterious effects of the people that are doing this work, the taxes that are not being paid on these goods and services that are being traded, can really lead to bad effects for a country and for its citizens. And so I wanted to find out more about, well, can oil have an effect? We're very familiar with the resource curse and the effects that oil can have on the formal economy. And so I wanted to see if that also occurred in the informal economy. So there, again, in the second box, you can see a puzzle. When you compare Turkey and Tunisia, you can see that in some variables that we would expect to affect the informal economy, such as remittances, corruption levels, human development index, government effectiveness, there's no statistical difference between Turkey and Tunisia, but yet there is a statistical difference in the informal economy estimate that I constructed. Turkey has a smaller informal economy than Tunisia, and yet we see Tunisia is much more dependent upon oil rents for their economy than Turkey. So could it be that the oil rents are having an effect on the informal economy? And that's what I seek to answer in this research. The problem is that how do you measure something that isn't observable, right? So if you go back to that picture, these transactions are not being recorded. There's no receipts. There's no tax being collected. So the informal economy literature has developed numerous different ways to attempt to get at informal economic behavior, and all of them have strengths and weaknesses. The one that I use is a confirmatory factor analysis, by which you take observable variables that you have a good theoretical reason to believe will be an indicator of informal economic activity, and then you model them to create a latent construct of an unobservable variable, in this case, the informal economy. This is used very frequently in psychology to measure things like grit or determination, things that we know exist, we just don't know how to measure them. And so in the methods section, you can see that I first create a variable of currency demand using a currency demand linear regression model. And then with that variable, I construct the latent informal economy estimate along with two other variables, logged GDP growth and a rule of law metric. That gets me the informal economy variable. And you can see I use two different ones there. One with the modeled currency demand as one of the indicator variables, and then the second model uses the modeled currency demand minus the observed currency demand, which I call excess cash. Once I have that dependent variable, then in the results section, I regress for 145 countries from 2000 to 2016 to see the results that oil rents will have on that informal economy. And other popularly theorized hypotheses include taxes. Taxes should have an effect on the informal economy, as should government effectiveness. And you can see I split the results between developed and developing countries, because it really does seem to be, not only in the literature but in my own work, that the informal economy does behave differently in developed and developing countries. So it makes theoretical sense to split those countries apart in the analysis. And you can see that in developed countries there on the bottom right, that oil rents are only significant at the 10% level. They're not significant at the 5% level. And they do lead to a larger informal economy in developed countries at the 10% level, whereas oil rents lead to a larger informal economy at the 1% level in developing countries. We can also see that taxes are positively related to the informal economy in developed countries, but insignificant with developing. And then government effectiveness, as we would expect, as government effectiveness goes up, the informal economy size would go down. We also see the same result with log GDP and corruption. So the preliminary results suggest that, yes, there is something to this. To bolster the case, I take a look at Ghana, which is a country that had very little oil production until 2010. They found oil in 2007. So Ghana represents a very good case study for me to test out my claim. And I demonstrate qualitative evidence that, yes, in the region where the oil was found, we did see an increase in the informal economy. So in short, that's the research. I still have much more work to do, but the preliminary results are promising, and I look forward to any questions or feedback that you have that I can use to make this paper better. Thank you so much for your time.